Namaste.
Namaste.
There may have been echoes in that first reading of something we read about when we studied Living Buddha, Living Christ, those 5 skandhas. And if you ask me what they are, I'm not going to be able to tell you. I have trouble remembering them. But it occurred to me as I was listening to that being read, that the whole Buddha's disconnect between experience and how we label it, and their whole struggle with that, what I want to say is the distance between experience and how we talk about it, is exactly what Jim was talking about before about golfings. And in fact, it's the heart of all really good comedy, is something a little bit out of context, right? The Beverly Hillbillies find golf balls. In their mind, what's a golf ball? It looks like an egg. And so they start trying to boil them, right? But I mean, it's the heart of all good comedy, is that misidentification, right? But in a very real way, that's what Buddhism is trying to get at, with the difference between experience and the way we try and describe it and talk about it. That once you start trying to talk about it, it's going to become imprecise. And if you carry it to an absurd level, it becomes comedy, right? And some of the best comedy is that. Responses to things that just aren't quite appropriate to context, that are rooted in some misunderstanding. Yesterday, at the wedding I did, it was at Camp Willoway. I don't know if you know where Camp Willoway is. It's on the Underwood Parkway in Wauwatosa, which one end of the Underwood Parkway is Watertown Plank Road, and the other end is Swan Boulevard. And so with all that freeway construction, getting in there is a hot mess. And a lot of people were actually coming from out of town. Talk about, things out of context. We're coming from out of town, and so they had their Google Maps, but of course none of the roads connect where they used to connect. So somebody was running late, and somebody went, and some of the people were coming, from my perspective, up front from back over there, and some of them were coming from over there, and the one guy pulled up in his car. And so I was actually standing up front, waiting for they were going to seat parents and grandparents, and then, or maybe just parents. And then the bridal party was going to come. Well, of course, then this guy was getting close who they were trying to talk in. So little did I know up front, waiting, that, this guy's going to come pulling up on the one side of this building in just a second, and everybody's looking at me, and I finally looked up and said, "Why are you all staring at me?" Which got a good laugh. Because it was an inappropriate response from the context, right? I mean, of course I should know why they're staring at me. And I did know why they were. I did, in fact, know, but that's not the point. And this whole thing about ego in the Eastern sense is about preservation of me, just as I am. The unchanging, eternal me, who, of course, is a complete fiction created in my own mind, because everything changes all the time. I don't know if you saw on Facebook, it was a little disturbing. A dog fell into a tar pit in India and survived, and there were mostly younger people. Over 2 days they massaged this dog with vegetable oil, which who knew gets tar off. So next time there's tar in your car, you go out with vegetable oil. You do that?
Yeah.
You know everything. So they massaged this dog and finally got the tar off of the dog. But it's sort of a metaphor for ego, right? Because isn't falling in the tar pit what we want? I mean, everything's preserved. The dog couldn't move. Its eyes were blinking, but that's what we want to do to ourselves, right? We don't want to jump in the tar pit, but we want to just preserve everything right as it is. And one of the ways that really manifests is we start getting completely obsessed, especially in the teenage years, about what other people think about us. Walk through a middle school. Hold your nose, because it smells bad in there. But walk through a middle school. As classes pass, and listen to the talk at the locker. You know what she said about it? She said oh, geez. And now kids, unfortunately, some children in their 20s, because adolescence is delayed, are still all worried about the same stupid stuff. Did you see what she said on Facebook about me? And it's this preoccupation with what other people think that's a necessary developmental stage that we should move out of. But there are parts of us, even the healthiest people among us, that don't. What will they think if I do this? And for me, and I was taught to be preoccupied with that. For me, the best way to get over it was to do absolutely crazy stuff in public. Because
and you have never stopped.
I've never stopped. Because the only way you can get yourself to do that and be comfortable with it is to do it more than once, first of all. But then you will surrender this idea that what other people think matters. Because you'll have put yourself voluntarily in a position where most normal people will look at you and go, that person's nuts. And as you become okay with that, okay, sure. And we start to surrender not just a preoccupation with what other people think of us, but a preoccupation with what the rules are, right? And isn't that the heart of religion? What the rules are. And there are whole groups of people that call themselves different things. There's a guy named Darren Hufford, who I like about 60% of what he does, who was a Pentecostal preacher who now runs something on the internet called the Free Believers Society, where they're encouraging people who have left church to still form community, because a lot of the things about conservative churches, of course, is that your friends should really only be people who belong to the church. And in that regard, it's very cult-like. So if you start to say, hey, this place is a little wacky, and you leave, you're going to be ostracized by your friends because they're still inside. And they wish they could leave too, probably. But can't. So now it becomes really, like as I said, very cult-like. Can I break free? And what Darren Hufford's trying to do in his context is give people a place to go and say, yeah, you can still be a good person. You can even still have they wouldn't use the word spiritual probably, but you can still, believe in God and read your Bible and talk about God and just get together in people's living rooms, and it's really okay. And that's a step towards, for them, doing what's really crazy, right? Not go to church. Mm-hmm. That's as crazy as when I used to, chase our daughter through the mall trying to kick her in the butt with my foot out on the side while I went, ah!
True story.
Just because to her that was embarrassing, and I thought, perfect.
That's the rights of parents.
It is.
It's embarrassing.
And hopefully they break free of that, right? And so that's the great religious struggle of the day. Can I break free? Is it okay? What will people think of me? What will God think of me? I mean, for some people, that's really the most important thing. I saw a post today, one of my friends had posted something about Sawyer Brown, which is our country group, is coming to where he lives, and he was remembering this concert he went to in high school, and I said, you're dating yourself here. And somebody commented, that was my first secular concert.
Secular?
Yeah, and I just kind of went, oh, man, because but for her it was probably huge, that first step outside the rules, right? And was lightning going to strike? Was my sister going to get kidnapped or whatever her religious affiliation that they had threatened her with. And so in some ways we have a personal ego that says, I have to protect something in me, so I'm not going to be able to tolerate any affront to my identity, because, that would mean that I'm not everlasting. And then there's this spiritual ego we develop where we submit ourselves to the rules, and we better not step outside those rules because everything's going to fall apart. And for some of us, there's that dichotomy that develops between what's spiritual and what's secular. A lot of us in the room are old enough to remember playing the White Album backwards to listen for messages, And so,
With the aid of certain substances. explain it.
That's right, because Satan was going to speak to us through there. But if you want to see what that is, if you want to see about breaking free of what people think, and these popularity contests that are both spiritual and about our daily life, you see Jesus confronting the Pharisees, and what is it every time? It's the Pharisees have constructed a box, and if you're in the box, you're okay. And if you start peering out the window of the box, you're getting close to danger. And if you step out, well, we can't be responsible for what happens to you outside the box. There's lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And we don't know what all else. So you're better off staying inside the box. And the problem is the box has been washed in hot water and it's shrinking. You know, it's shrinking all the time. And there's this part of us that is, because we're living, right, we have two choices. We can grow or we can die. And so whether physically, and whether, if it's physically, whether vertically or, horizontally, or whether it's that we're growing spiritually or just cognitively, we're getting brighter, or experientially because we're not falling for the same old bullshit that we fell for, we're going to push against the walls of that box. And if my job is dependent on you remaining in the box, I will do whatever I need to do to keep you in the box. And that was the Pharisees. And that's why the only people Jesus ever got mad at were Pharisees or their minions. The only people he ever criticized were Pharisees or their minions.
That's where the minions came from.
That is. They weren't yellow then, but they had the yarmulke. So, and minions I'm thinking of, the money changers, the people that ran the temple, who's going to support the system. And the fact that I think he saw this cornerstone, or it used to get translated, what am I looking at you for? Didn't it used to get translated back in the day as capstone sometimes? I think maybe, I don't know for sure. But I used to be fascinated by arches, and not the golden ones, but the ones in buildings and walls with stone, where they'd stack up these stones, and then if you ever notice at the very top, there's one that's shaped a little differently. And somebody explained to me, because I don't know from architecture, that is what held the whole thing together. And then if you pulled that one out, it would fall. And it was always kind of fascinating to me. It seemed to me like gravity would say, they're all kind of trying to fall, but no, it was this, that was it. And so I think this used to sometimes get translated capstone. So that, and in saying that the stone the builders rejected was either the capstone or the cornerstone, because we laid the cornerstone first and built the building around it. He's saying, and you can look at it like he's saying, Jesus is the cornerstone. And that's great. No problem with that. I'm going to suggest another way to look at it too. You can have that one. I have that one. Great, perfect. But so often, the things that the system wants to throw away are the foundations of a free and healthy spirituality. Asking questions, having doubt. After all, the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. So, but you can't doubt, right? And so, all these things that anybody who builds the box tells you better not go near may in fact be the cornerstone of an important segment of a healthy spirituality. And Jesus is identifying that tendency. Now, what's really interesting, before they're kind of sort of problematic, is that the whole tenant-farmer thing is an extremely unjust economic system. So, there's an interesting play in that too. So the landlord sends people out to collect the money from the tenant farmers. But tenant farming wasn't any way where you'd ever get enough money to get your own little patch. You were going to forever be dependent on the landlord. And so there's some things in there we can ponder, not today because we don't have time, but about economic injustice. And you shouldn't be so surprised when you send, Vinny and, what's the other name?
Guido.
Guido, thank you. Vinny and Guido, your collectors, right? out to take the produce away from the tenant farmer, that they might not be so happy. And maybe, really, you might say that the whole thing about the farmer then sending his son out, if we can just step away from the idea that that son is Jesus and step into the idea that when systems are inherently unjust, sooner or later, people will push back in a big way. And it's not going to matter who you send out. And I think maybe the way we've edited up our Bible and put our little paragraph headers in, we've done a disservice by keeping these two stories together. That's one thing, and it's a lot more about economic justice and injustice. And this cornerstone business is quite another. That it is this new way of looking at things. And the problem is, when you go say the cornerstone's most important, what are the people inside the box going to say? You're a sinner. You're losing your salvation. You're going to go to hell. I always knew you were like that. 57 different things. And so that's this interesting sort of double-sided thing, that if you trip over the cornerstone, you're going to get hurt. And if it falls on you, you're going to get hurt. So no matter what, there's no way around it. You're going to have to deal with this issue. And by running away and hiding from it, you're still going to have this issue waiting for you. And I think that's the cornerstone falling on you. You can try and hide all you want, but sooner or later, you're going to have to deal with something. Sooner or later, somebody's going to fall into the tar pit. Sooner or later, there's going to be some problem that will put you up against your box. And probably involve somebody very close to you. And now you're going to have to make a choice between the one you love and your box. And for most of us, the box goes every time. And I would say for those of us who've made it outside of the box already, part of our job is to look at people that are in that struggle, in their isolation, and offer them love and support and say, hey, I've been in the box too. And one of the things about it being washed in hot water is, it gets a little moldy. It starts to smell a little bad, and it really is going to be okay.